Welcome to Beacon Radio with your host, Steve Teel. Beacon Radio, delivering hope, inspiration, and change. For more information about the Beacon, log on to sabeacon.com. And now, with this week's Beacon Radio, here's your host, Steve Teel.
Thank you. So good to be with you listeners every week talking to difference makers. And I am so grateful. Beacon Radio, we're a part of sabeacon.com, the newspaper we've been publishing for 15 years. And it is just such a blessing. Thanks to Keith Leslie and Pam Leslie and the team. It's just really a blessing. And I appreciate Roland Ruiz and all that he does in producing this show. Man, he goes the extra mile every time. Hey, listen, today's show, it's Mother's Day weekend. So I want to tell you at the last segment of the show today, I'm going to talk to my mom. She's the one who taught me to be a blessing, and that has stuck with me throughout my life, even on days I don't feel like being a blessing. I'm going to ask her, where did that come from, because it sure has changed my life. And, of course, Roland and I sign off the show every weekend by saying, remember what Mom says, be a blessing. Also today, here's one way I can bless you. I can give away some free DVDs. I've got a couple to give away. Now, let's play a little game today. We're going to talk to Dallas Jenkins of the film The Resurrection of Gavin Stone. You don't see too many Christian films that are also comedies. I want to talk to Dallas all about that. I want to talk to him about his cast choices and just how hard it is to do comedy. It's not easy, but he's done a really good job. And if you don't win a DVD by emailing me, steve@sabeacon.com, then go and buy The Resurrection of Gavin Stone. Now, here's a part of the game, though. I'm going to ask Dallas in our conversation, I'm going to ask him, hey, tell me one of your favorite movies. And I'll give him a chance to tell us a couple. I want you to listen closely enough that you can email me and say, steve@sabeacon.com, this was his favorite movie. And then Dallas and I share a love of comics, of comedians. So I'm going to ask him, hey, who's your favorite comedian? So that's another way. Give me that name of that comic. Email me, steve@sabeacon.com. You'll be entered to win the DVD, The Resurrection of Gavin Stone. Hey, I'm Steve Teel. I'm your host of Beacon Radio, delivering hope, inspiration, and change. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Dallas Jenkins.
Beacon Radio is a part of the San Antonio Beacon newspaper and website, sabeacon.com. The Beacon has been serving San Antonio and surrounding communities for over 15 years, bringing hope, inspiration, and change. Go to sabeacon.com for stories and radio interviews with Shaq author William Paul Young, hockey star Rocco Grimaldi, American Ninja Warrior Daniel Gill, Duck Dynasty's Sadie Robertson, singer Carrie Job, and author Laura Casey, plus so many more. Log on now at sabeacon.com.
Are Sundays a joy for you? They are for me, because I get to go into the presence of God at Momentum Bible Church. Our worship leader, John David Cornwell, is so gifted as a musician and leader, but also has the biggest heart to lead us into God's presence, to encounter Him, and to praise Jesus. And he has a great team, too. Join us at Momentum Bible Church Sundays, 10 a.m. at Cibolo Green Elementary School near Johnson High School. MomentumBibleChurch.com has directions and information. Beacon Radio here, Steve Teel, delivering hope, inspiration, and change. Listeners, San Antonio, Austin, Houston, all of y'all that are catching this show today, we're going to be blessed. You're going to be blessed. You're going to meet Dallas Jenkins, film director, film producer. He's been doing this for years. You know his name. You know his work. Even if you're not familiar right this second, you have seen his work. The movie that we're going to talk about is The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, Christian comedy. And man, it's coming out on DVD and Blu-ray May 2nd. It's already released on digital HD. You want to see this and you want to share it. It's a great kind of fish out of water story. So Dallas, welcome to Beacon Radio.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Man, we're really excited, and you've made a Christian comedy. That's not easy to do, and you've made it. My wife and I got to see it in January at the theaters. You did a great job, and you've made it funny, and you've made it fun, but you've also, given it heart. So congratulations on what you've done. It's a great job, Dallas.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I think making a comedy, period, is difficult. Comedy is so much dependent on timing, and I think comedy of all the genres is probably the most difficult to do. It's just something that I've just always been passionate about. In my real life, I've always been a big fan of stand-up comics. One of the reasons why Angela Johnson is in the movie, she plays the pastor's daughter. Ironically enough, plays a character who doesn't know how to tell a joke, but in real life, she's a pretty popular stand-up comic.
Oh, she's hysterical. We've had her on the show, and I love her.
I think that comedy helps actually soften the blow for emotion and for meaning. I think that when you are laughing, anytime you're laughing at a movie or a stand-up comic or a TV show, it inherently means that the performer is ahead of you. And what I mean by that is, laughing is always unintentional. It's something that just kind of happens spontaneously, unless you're faking it. But when you're watching a movie, if you laugh, that means that the filmmaker got to you, whether you wanted him or her to or not. And so what that does is, I think even just subconsciously, it allows you to trust the filmmaker more, to listen more, and then ultimately when there's something that's maybe emotional or more meaningful or intellectual or spiritual to say, I think you're just kind of softened for it because you've been entertained and you've been laughing.
Right. Well, I agree 100%, and it's interesting because I love stand-up comics too. And we did have Angela Johnson on the show. This is before I knew that she was in the Resurrection of Gavin Stone, and I mean, she is hysterical, and with that, even though in the movie she plays a straight man, like you said, but it does have a way of softening hearts. But it does seem so hard to do. Like, it just seems like it's that much easier just to go with the serious, hard issues, and just people are just sitting in their seats for 2 hours and they may be moved, but at the end they may just feel like, okay, I need to go sleep for 3 days. That was really rough. So
well, I think part of that from faith-based films is because they're so message-driven. We Christians sometimes take ourselves a little too seriously. So we feel like, well, this is too important. We just need to get the message across. And like I said, because it is difficult. It is difficult to do comedy anyway. So I think, like you said, maybe sometimes it's just a little easier to just get our message across. I just think it's worth it. I think it's worth taking the time to make sure that the movie is also entertaining because, I think the point of a movie it needs to be to first and foremost to just tell a good story and to entertain. And then if you also have a message, which I do, of course, that's great. But I want people to walk away from the film first and foremost having enjoyed it. And they can get their sermons from church, and they can get their worship from church and from being in their car and whatever. But I think for the movie, I just want to maybe tell a parable like Jesus told parables, just to bring them to a closer understanding of who God is, and then ultimately the church can do its job.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great idea and a great vision. Now, we're talking to Dallas Jenkins. The movie is The Resurrection of Gavin Stone. You're going to want to get it. You're going to want to share it. DVD and Blu-ray May 2nd. In fact, you can email me right now. I've got a couple that I can give away. Steve@sabeacon.com. Now, I'm going to let Dallas just help us just to make it interesting. Can you give me the name of a movie or one of your favorite comics? And I'm going to ask our listeners if they want to win that they can send in kind of the secret password. So do you have a favorite comic or a favorite movie you could share, Dallas?
Well, my favorite film of all time, the movie that I think inspired me the most, is It's a Wonderful Life. And one of the reasons I love that movie so much is because it doesn't shy away from pain and darkness before it reveals hope. And so that's my favorite film. And I'm just going to, I think, I have a lot of favorite comics, but I'll go ahead and I think Brian Regan.
Oh, my gosh, you're killing me right now. Yes. Yeah,
because he's so self-deprecating.
Right.
And of course, I have several comics that I like that I don't necessarily share with everybody because maybe they're a little,
right.
a little on the crass side. But Brian Regan, does his comedy without resorting to language and inappropriateness to do it, and I really admire that. And he's so real, and I think what I try to do in my movies as well is, and I think what we did with Resurrection of Gavin Stone is acknowledge some of the weaknesses and humor that comes from just being self-deprecating about church life. And Brian Regan, I think, just owns that lane in comedy of kind of revealing his own weaknesses before he gives you the gut punch of the humor.
Oh my gosh, Brian Regan is so classic. Well, I'll tell you what, talk about we're on a similar path. My favorite movies, not that you asked, but It's a Wonderful Life is in my top 3, and then Field of Dreams and Miracle on 34th Street. Those are the 3 that I've always kind of just, since 20 years ago, they impacted my life, and I just kind of go with it. So I understand. Yeah. And Brian Regan is, our family's favorite comic of all time.
Great.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, he is amazing. So I'm going to try to get him on the radio show, even though I'm not sure if he has a faith or not. I just want to talk to Brian Regan. So,
sure.
But we're talking to Dallas Jenkins. What a pleasure. What an honor. And so if you want to win one of those DVDs, you email me, steve@sabeacon.com, and you give me the secret word there. It's a Wonderful Life or Brian Regan, and we'll get you a DVD if you're one of the first ones. So, all right, Dallas, you've been doing this for a while. And, I remember, I think at the age of 25, you produced your first movie?
Yeah, my very first film was back in 2000. It was called Hometown Legend. It's actually, still out there on DVD and streaming through Warner Brothers. And I at the time, the Christian film world really didn't exist back then.
Right.
It's grown so much in the last few years, but I made a high school football film set in Alabama and tried to just kind of capture the experience of Southern football, which you guys know about, of course, very well, but through a faith perspective. And, of course, I think we were a little, to pat myself on the back a little bit, I didn't realize that there was going to end up being about 10 faith-based football movies over the next 20 years. I think we were one of the first ones, so I'm proud of that fact. But I didn't know what I didn't know. I was 25 years old, and I was just trying to, my father and I, my father had a ton of success with the Left Behind series.
Right.
And so we had the opportunity to make a movie, and we thought, a lot of people are talking about making movies. Not a lot of people are making them, and so we just went ahead and did it and learned so much from telling that story, a hometown legend. And my dad wrote a book.
That's right.
From that story as well. And so we were just able to really learn a ton about filmmaking, and then that led to other films. So yeah, I've been doing this now since 2000. I've made about a dozen feature films and short films, but Gavin Stone, I think, is the one. Not only do I think it's the best one that we've made, but I think it also is the one that's the most, I think, has the most broad appeal because the main character is an outsider, a churchgoer for the first time. Non-churchgoers can identify with his character and see the story through his eyes. And then churchgoers, of course, can identify with the fact that this is set in a church. And so they appreciate the humor from that, but also the meaning that is given about the importance and value of church. And, of course, then the story of grace and the story of Jesus that we see as Gavin portrays the part of Jesus in this church's passion play.
Right. Can you tell us more about the movie just for people that are, and the story just for people that are hearing about this for the first time?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so Gavin Stone is a former child star who now is in his 30s and is kind of a washed-up celebrity wannabe. Had some trouble. I think a lot of child stars face that as they get older when they realize the world doesn't revolve around them. And in many ways, it's a painful realization and one that they've been victimized by, I think, a little bit. Yeah. But he ends up, is in his hometown for a party and it gets out of hand, and so he's sentenced to 200 hours of community service at a local church. And when he gets there, he's assigned to clean bathrooms, but he realizes that they're putting on this big Easter production, so he pretends to be a Christian so that he can play the part of Jesus in this passion play. So obviously a lot of the humor comes from him learning the language of Christianese and navigating through church world while trying to pretend like he's part of it. But then, of course, the meaning and the impact comes from him, by playing the part of Jesus, he's forced to learn more about him. And when you learn more about Jesus, you're drawn to him even more. And so that's kind of the story. But then, of course, how he impacts the church, and by bringing a bit of an outsider's perspective to the story, and an understanding of the grace, that they're forced to learn more too, and kind of be revived in their fresh understanding of who Jesus was.
Right, and I do really appreciate the comedy like we're talking about. I mean, it's a challenge to do, and I'm just so grateful that you're doing it. I just want some more great comedy. And I'm thinking about one scene in the movie where I think it's a dress rehearsal, and the scene from the Bible that is being portrayed is the woman who's caught in the act of adultery. And so Jesus says, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. I don't remember verbatim what was said in the script, but and then they start to walk away, and then Gavin Stone, acting as Jesus, says, "Where are your accusers?" And then he says, "Go and sin no more." And then he immediately say, "Wait, this doesn't work. This doesn't work."
Well, here's what's so interesting about that scene is, there's some humor there as he's, but what's really interesting is why he's saying it doesn't work, and this is one of the key themes of the movie. So he's acting out this part, and he's doing it like you've always seen Jesus movies and Jesus productions in church.
So that's kind of what you were going for with, his portrayal of Jesus.
Yeah, he's kind of going with how it's normally done, and Jesus usually comes across as very stiff and formal and pious, and so he's saying this feels stiff and formal to me, and he starts asking questions. Why is Jesus even doing this? And what's interesting is the churchgoers and the pastor's daughter, who's the director, she's saying, no, it looks fine, because she's so used to this. Oh. We've seen Jesus stories her whole life, and he says, no, this doesn't feel right because it feels so stiff and formal. And then later, I don't want to give too much away, but when he's performing it on the opening night, it hits him what is happening in this scene and the grace that Gavin Stone has experienced from being at this church is being lived out by Jesus to this woman. And he can't help but be personal and intimate, and doesn't feel like Jesus would have done this in such a pious and stiff and formal way, like go and sin no more, and speaking in this kind of old-fashioned dialect and King James Version dialogue, and brings a unique, what shouldn't be unique but is, but an intimate portrayal of that scene that ends up actually impacting the churchgoers because they, again, are looking at it in a new way. And so, I really wanted that scene to portray that Gavin, as an outsider, is recognizing that the usual, typical, cliched portrayal of Jesus is not right.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, and I think one of the characters, you do use that self-deprecating humor and kind of Christians a little bit maybe poking fun at ourselves. And so I think one of the characters kind of starts to pontificate and sort of speak in this language that nobody really understands.
Well, so he's like, why? First he's just saying, so why is Jesus even doing this? Does he know her? Why is he giving her? Why is he forgiving her? And the guy, the kind of the theological nerd at the church, stands up and starts pontificating about the doctrine of atonement and the moral parameters that is set up by the creator of the moral parameters. And Gavin's just kind of staring at him blankly because he has no idea what he's talking about. But that was another thing we really wanted to do in this movie was, poke a little fun at ourselves. And so there's a lot of humor where we kind of expose a little bit of some Christian cliches. But I also wanted to be affectionate. And so the theological nerd in the movie is also the kindest and sweetest person in the movie. And I wanted to make sure that we're saying, I'm not saying, look, being a theological nerd is wrong. It's not. But let's just kind of, let's just poke a little fun at ourselves, have some fun, but also be ultimately very affectionate towards what a church can be.
Right. Awesome. Okay. We're talking to Dallas Jenkins, director of the Resurrection of Gavin Stone. He's been doing movies and making an impact for years and years. And this movie is really fresh, and I just love the humor and the heart. And I really encourage you guys to get a hold of it. It's going to be available May 2nd, DVD and Blu-ray. It's already available on digital HD. Get a hold of it, share it, and just enjoy it. I think it is going to bring a fresh perspective to you. It doesn't even always have to be about, I'm going to evangelize and share this. It's gonna help your heart to see it in a different way, which I really appreciate how you've done that, Dallas. So you're talking about the importance of comedy, and it seems like Christian filmmakers, and I know you're a filmmaker, so you probably don't even want to be labeled as Christian filmmakers. So I'm not trying to offend you, because I know you just want to make great films with a message, but not just so overbearing and all that. But you love comedy, and obviously comedy's impacted your life. Is this the first of, I'm looking at your history, some of the movies I have not seen, so I did not see What If. I don't know if that's a comedy, or is this, is Gavin Stone, The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, your first comedy, or is there other comedies in the background I don't know about?
No, What If, which came out in 2010, is, I think, similar to Gavin Stone in its style, where there is a lot of comedic elements, but ultimately it also has a lot to say, and it's very emotional. I think the common thread among a lot of my movies, especially What If and Resurrection of Gavin Stone, is telling the story of the Christian life through the eyes of an outsider.
Yeah.
So What If is kind of a reverse It's a Wonderful Life. So the main character hears, or an angel kind of comes to him and says, I'm going to show you what your life would have looked like had you followed your true calling, what you should have done. Because he was a guy who kind of gave up his Christian faith and
I like it.
The business world. And he's like, your true calling was to be a pastor. And so he kind of wakes up, and all of a sudden he's a pastor and a husband and a father of two, and is immediately kind of thrust into this and has to give a sermon when he doesn't have any idea what he's doing. So again, it's similar to Gavin Stone in that respect, where it's an outsider, having to kind of fit into this church world. And I just think that's just a really ripe opportunity to again give the story of what church world and Christian world is like, but in a way that outsiders can appreciate as well.
Exactly.
And identify with the main character. So What If is for sure there's comedy that comes from him trying to experience that. But yeah, I think every movie that I make is intended to be dramatic, but comedy is used as a tool to kind of to get that message across.
Right. Okay. So the Resurrection of Gavin Stone, you're saying, I mean, this is the one that you're kind of most proud of, or you feel best about, or whatever. Bad word choice here.
No,
so
that's fine. And yeah, I think it's for sure. I think every filmmaker gets better with each film, hopefully. And
hopefully.
I think The Resurrection of Gavin Stone is my best film, but again, What If was very impactful too, and I still available, and I still hear from people all the time about it. And I think for both What If and Resurrection of Gavin Stone are unique in the faith-based world because of not only the comedy, but again, just doing it in a different way that doesn't feel. I mean, I have a strong message, there's no question about it. And Resurrection of Gavin Stone is an explicitly Christian movie. It's set in a church. But over and over and over again, everyone who sees it says it doesn't feel like a Christian movie. It's a movie set in a church that doesn't feel like a church movie. And I think it's just because, A, the humor, B, the fact that there's, the main character is an outsider, and C, I think, again, the acting. I mean, I think, that's something we're really proud of with Resurrection of Gavin Stone is, I think, the quality of the acting.
Right. Well, talk to us because the cast is pretty amazing. So can you tell us about working with, you had Brett Dalton, he's from Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Angela Johnson, you already mentioned, she's amazing comic and actress. D.B. Sweeney, Neil Flynn, people know probably from The Middle and maybe Scrubs, and then Shawn Michaels as well. Can you talk to us? I mean, how do you assemble such a cast, and how important is it to have? I assume that some of these people aren't Christian, but you're just trying to get the right people for the right part. How does that work out as a filmmaker who is Christian? Yeah,
I mean, I think that, Brett Dalton, for example, is not a churchgoer, but he just loved the script so much. I mean, he got the script and just instantly resonated with it. And I remember it was funny when I was talking to him via Skype after he'd auditioned and done such a great job. I said to him, "So I got to ask you, why are you interested in doing a faith-based movie?" And he's like, "Oh, I didn't think of this as a faith-based movie. I just thought it was a great story." And I said, "Well, it's set in a church. You play the part of Jesus. There's prayer. There's, conversion. There's, salvation. The message of the gospel." And he was like, "Yeah, it was just, it's just a great, funny movie, and with a really powerful, strong message." And so for him, I think just resonated with him. And same thing with Neil Flynn, who's one of my family's favorites because we're such huge fans of The Middle.
Right, us too.
And I think people just really resonated with the script. I think a good script,
right.
I don't think it matters whether there's, a Christian message in the movie when it's good. And I think there's a myth that comes. A lot of people think, people don't like Christian movies because they're Christian, and people just don't like Christianity on screen. And I think for a lot of times, and this is not always true, and I'm not saying this to be critical, but a lot of times people don't like Christian movies because they're just not good. Sometimes there's plenty of great Christian movies out there. So again, I'm not criticizing any particular filmmaker, but I think that some Christian movies just simply don't tell the truth. about life, and just, again, I think acting is such a huge part of that. I think that when you can find the best actors for the roles, that just makes a huge difference. And I think especially when you're doing comedic scenes, finding actors who have good timing and an understanding of comedy, then that also not only helps the comedic scenes, but helps the dramatic scenes, because timing is everything, both in comedy and drama.
Right, and I thought Brett Dalton was great. And, I don't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so that was an introduction to me. I know your family's pretty big fans. I think you've got some kids that are big fans of his, right?
Yeah, my son is the one who got him cast in this movie because we kept pushing for him. And I didn't really watch the show much, and I thought his character was actually kind of boring. So I didn't know that he could pull off Gavin Stone, who's so charismatic and funny. And then when he gave the audition, I was like, oh, gosh, we found our guy. So my son is the one who gets all the credit for that.
How awesome is that? Man, this is really a family business.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool. Well, I thought he was fantastic, and I think it's kind of cool in an ironic sense of the word that he wasn't a Christian. I mean, that he brought an outsider's perspective even as an actor. I think that's pretty cool the way that worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, just getting to know him, and that's one of the things that we try to do when we make movies, too, is some people ask, do you only work with Christians? Or why do you not work only with Christians? And I'll say, well, are we not only willing to work with church outsiders or non-Christians, we actually love it, because it's an opportunity to be salt and light in an industry that doesn't normally... where they don't normally meet Christians. I mean, a lot of the producers on this film and some of the people that I've worked with haven't worked with or met a Christian in decades.
Yeah.
And I just think that's good for art in general, is to have different perspectives and good for just community. It's just getting to know people better and having a different understanding of maybe from what you've heard about people from the other side, that maybe they're not who you thought they were.
It's great talking to Dallas Jenkins. I've got a lot more to ask him, though, so I want you to stick around. We're going to go to our intermission, and we'll be back for more with Dallas Jenkins.